Hello, everyone. Today is May 14th, 2025. This is the Kubernetes Data Protection Working Group meeting. Okay, so first let's get an update about the CPT. Hello, can someone call maybe?
Yeah, we just posted it in the Kubernetes chat with working group channel. Yeah, not much change since last time. We've got feedback on the blog, which Prasad has looked into and responded. So there's a pending PR for some end-to-end job. I posted the link in the chat. Yeah. Uh, and yeah, we still have stuff pending on the from the last time from the health check, etc. So we'll be working on that.
Sorry, what house check?
We're having trouble getting the gRPC based health check to get through
Oh,
security scanner, so we want to revert to an
oh, okay.
HTTP health check. So
Okay, so looks like there's still some discussion going on. All right.
probably, yeah.
Yeah, I'm resolving the discussion by responding, but all the changes that were suggested or had feedback that I have made, yeah, there are some open conversation I'm trying to close.
At the end of Thursday, okay. So they're saying kind of too tight to go in today. Okay, so you probably need to change the prefix or something, but it's okay. I mean, if we just publish it a little bit later, right? If we can't get everything in,
Mhm.
then I see that it was saying drop the prefix.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
You just
And
ping me if you, yeah, I was just saying if if they need me to review or something, just ping me. But otherwise, I see that you are still resolving comments from, yeah,
yeah,
mainly
yeah,
Tim, right? Okay.
yes.
Okay, thank you. And then this is the tab. Okay, so that's the EG test, I think. Um,
and if there's anything, Xing, if we want to discuss the CBT ID VMware
oh
issue.
yes, we actually should talk about that. I actually want to ask that CPT ID. Not so this is like what? Okay. CPT ID, right? Um, can you maybe it's better for you to show the API. Maybe it's better for you to show that we can talk about that what we may need. So
Let me
do you
see.
want to share? Okay, maybe we'll make you a co-presenter since
Just a
we
second.
can see.
Oh, where's that? Okay. Nine. Where's the protobuf? Yeah. Yeah, so let me see. So uh, this page. Oh, 1 second, sorry. It's
Okay.
too many things open on my desktop. So. Can you see this?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So this is the Kubernetes. This is 3314. Okay. This is the Kubernetes
App. Okay.
get metadata. Yeah. So this is the RPC, the gRPC for Kubernetes API. Okay, see the CSI API. Okay,
Okay.
and then there is the Kubernetes side of it. Okay, so the issue, which as I understand, and Xing, please correct me, right, is that in some vendors, notably VMware, right, have a change block tracking ID which is saved in the storage, unlike storage layer, and may be available through the CSI driver and the volume snapshot content, stuff like that. But the point is, it is possible to support a request a change block tracking against the current snapshot ID and the tracking ID from a previous snapshot. Is that correct, Ching?
Right. Yeah. So
So that
basically,
essentially translates in our terms to not having the second volume snapshot object sitting around when we make that call.
so basically you're talking about just to want to make sure everybody follows that. So can you highlight that? That's the get map. It's the delta
Yeah.
thing, right?
That's this one,
So this
right?
one right now, it requires a base snapshot name and a target snapshot name. But so I think in our case, there's a penalty if you keep snapshot around for too long. So I guess that's like a ask for us to see if we can actually not making the first snapshot name required. But you have some other. Okay, what are you? Can you
Right.
talk about how you
Okay,
think about
so
solving this?
given that right now we require two snapshots, right? The idea is that, okay, so what do we do with this data? Just to refresh people. So this is the Kubernetes API. This is dealing in names from the Kubernetes side. Our sidecar and iterator, etc., take these Kubernetes objects and use that to construct the equivalent API call to the CSI API. And the CSI API we provide snapshot identifiers. Okay, so ultimately we are responsible for taking this data and constructing that CSI call where the driver has only the required data. Okay. So we need an alternative source to provide that CSI ID, which we have to hand to the CSI driver. Now,
Can you show the CSI one? If you
sure.
can show the CSI API.
CSI API is here. Where is this? Get metadata
It also
delta.
takes two IDs, right? I guess that's just
Right.
that.
It takes
To
two
confirm
IDs. It
that.
takes the base
Same.
snapshot
Okay.
ID and a
Yeah.
target snapshot ID.
Okay. Okay.
Right. That's
Right.
that's
Yeah.
this API. Right. And the corresponding Kubernetes one I just showed you. Right. Whoops. There you go.
Yeah.
Shoot. Here it is. Yep.
Yeah.
So we're the again, I don't know whether it's forward or backwards. We'll work out then. But one of these things, basically, right? We need, as an alternative to having a snapshot name, we have to have some data. Now, question is, how is that data presented? Now, at its surface, well, we cannot just take we cannot give up both snapshots, okay? Because we do a SAR check for permission, right? And we have to establish at least that the caller has permission in that namespace to access volume snapshots. So I think the base snapshot, right, or whatever the first snapshot, right, one of the snapshots have to be present. Now the point is the tracking ID. If the backup application calling us can obtain the tracking ID uh, out of band with respect to this, or we allow for another object which we define in the spec, just to track change block IDs, tracking IDs. I don't know how those objects would come into play, but essentially, if such an object were to exist, we could take that object name as an alternative. We'll have a different field, and then you set either one or the other. So those are the two things which I am playing with in my mind right now.
So for example, here, like the base snapshot name, maybe that can be like some field with two. It can have like combination of two fields, but one of
Or
them.
we'll add another field. That's just
Uh,
representation, but
yeah,
essentially, yes.
but basically we'll just say one of that. You need to set one of that.
Yes.
Xing, can the storage driver not create uh, no, a volume snapshot object in Kubernetes cluster, but actually not refer it to like a full-blown volume snapshot underneath? Maybe just have a reference with some
that's
parameters or
confusing,
something.
right? That's confusing. That's like it's like you said you have a snapshot there. People try to use it, but you're saying no, you cannot use this snapshot. This is not a snapshot. You have a basically you're saying you have a volume snapshot API object, but it's actually not really a snapshot. That's a problem, right? That's because people
Oh,
start using it, right? So
yeah, like it would act like a representation, but like in any other way, like the backup vendor is supposed to know to like pass this ID somehow. Otherwise, so that may be a bit
no, but I'm
confusing.
just saying,
Yeah.
can we make this a if it's either this snapshot name or this tracking name, then backup vendor.
Xing, what was the original question?
So the original, because so basically we can't really keep all those snapshots around for that long. There's a performance penalties and all of that. So we don't really want to like always
You
require
mean in the Kubernetes
snapshots.
cluster
Well,
or
I'm talking
outside
about
Kubernetes?
vSphere. I'm talking about storage side, right? Because this is we're talking about two snapshots. So here we are talking about you will need to take two snapshots, and then those snapshots has to be on the storage system, right? It's the requirement here, right? So you have to keep those snapshots there all the time for you to retrieve this delta.
Well, I mean,
In our
you
case, you actually
you
don't
delete
need
them as
to.
you go, right? Because you have the one that's the base of the delta, and you have another one which is the delta itself,
But
and
then
then
you always have to keep you always have to keep the previous one. That's the thing, right? Because we don't really need to.
you got to
We
keep.
don't
I
need
mean
that. We don't need
if you want the
we don't need the
benefits
first one.
of this snapshot tracking, of course you need to keep the snapshot around like
We
that.
actually don't need that. Yeah. So basically
But
we can just
two
yeah.
two is not a large number. I that's what I find puzzling. I mean,
But that's a feedback I'm getting, right? So that's not efficient for us. We don't want to keep the first snapshots around, and we have a way
from a specific
not to
vendor.
have that. Yeah, I'm talking about vSphere, right? We don't
Yeah.
need to keep the first one, and then we have a way to do that. I mean, it's just we can give you a
Yeah,
different.
But how do they
VMware API, they have something here when you
how do they
query.
specify the if it's changed block tracking, it's changed since when? Like what
And there
is
is a
the
track. Yeah, and there is the idea that he was a maybe Carl. You can show that again.
okay?
There
You're
was
saying they
a
have like a
there is
pseudo
a way. There's
snapshot.
another idea. They have this other ID.
Okay,
It's
okay. I mean that's not how this feature was designed. Like we could develop an extension to change block tracking that was like change block against something other than snapshots.
but the
And
delta
then
is actually still the snapshot delta. I mean, the results you get is still the same thing. It's
I know. I'm
yeah.
just saying like all of this has been written with Kubernetes or CSI snapshots as the raw input, and there's no reason we can't modify the spec to say we also accept alternative things that would qualify for this VMware. But like that's a change to the spec, right? That's a new thing we'd have to
Okay,
go
so that's
implement.
a
That's what we're
change to
talking about.
the. So Ben, I'm sensitive to changes in the CSI spec. I don't want to change the CSI spec. This would be a change in the Kubernetes spec, which is used to create the request which goes to the CSI spec. So
Well,
But
want to have
the,
anything.
the CSS
the
specs,
thing is,
yeah, it's going to be confusing. I think if we can maybe you change both. Maybe Ben, you were trying to
I was
say
going to
something.
say in CSI, a snapshot is defined as like something that you can create new volumes from. And so like if that's not the case with this ID that VMware has, then it's not a snapshot, and like we have to call it something else. And we should. I mean, I get that like it's more work to change the CSI spec, but like I feel like it's the correct thing to do here,
Well,
unless
it's an ID. I mean, unless VMware CSI driver can define some technique, right, whereby it's an ID field. You could make it a formatted ID field, and parse it, right? Because it's still just a string.
Yeah, but I mean, for interoperability, like COs and SPs need to know what these things are supposed to be and how they're supposed to
Right. So
work.
it comes back to what's the origin of this data? I mean, this
I
field
mean,
it originates from the storage subsystem. It's not that me as
yeah.
a backup vendor is going to invent this stuff, correct?
So VMware can choose to violate the spec and just do whatever the heck they want. That's always a possibility, right? Every vendor has that option to just do something different. But like as a person who maintains a CSI spec, like I would have to say that is not spec compliant. That is a violation. And like if you want it to be blessed, we have to change the spec.
So basically,
unless they can find a way to just
it's
make it behave like a snapshot in every way.
I think it's probably, Carl, I think it's mostly the description, right? It's like how you're describing what is the space snapshot.
True. I mean, so right now we just say this is the identifier, right, of the snapshot. And in the Kubernetes terms, we pull this value out from the, I believe the snapshot handle, is it? I don't remember the call out, right? But we pull that out of the volume snapshot content and send that ID inside there. Now, so if the VMware CSI driver created that ID, so
if VMware wants to take the stance that they have two kinds of snapshots that are clonable and snapshots that are only usable for this change block tracking purpose, like they can try to do that. But like
really another, no, it's not it's not really another snapshot, right? It's the same snapshot. It's just
but you're saying they want to be able to delete the actual snapshot and just keep the ID
right.
around.
But it's still, yeah.
So once they do that, presumably you can't clone it anymore. And it's at that point, it's not the same kind of snapshot.
Yeah. It's just we cannot really call that a snapshot. It's something else.
But we could track it. That's the thing. So
tracking ID. So
yeah, it's a tracking ID.
It is a tracking ID. Maybe can we just call it a tracking ID? Just to
right. But the question is, does the tracking ID come out? See, so we have this layered Kubernetes API over the CSI API. The tracking ID, right, is something we're dealing with for Kubernetes objects, or do you want to push it all the way through to the CSI? Because in the CSI layer, it may not make any sense, right? It's just an ID still.
It is an ID, but I think maybe you can look at the language, how we're describing the base snapshot name. I just don't want to.
I mean, you have to look at it from the perspective of like someone who's coming in to write a new container orchestrator, a new CO, and they want to use CSI, and they go read the spec and they're trying to figure out how to do this. And if VMware's implementation does something that violates what the spec says, then the thing is, then they can't take advantage of the feature.
No, I agree. And so the thing over here is these IDs are strings, and the format of these strings is totally up to the vendor. So, for example, if VMware, right, if the VMware CSI driver wants to define a tracking ID in the form of, some format which doesn't interfere with their normal snapshot ID, like let's say tracking ID : some string, right? We really don't care in terms of the spec. We just take that string and pass it through. It's up to the CSI
but the question is how would
anyway.
a CO obtain that ID?
Well, that's what we're coming to, and that is what the discussion is about. So right now the CSI spec doesn't seem to care, doesn't need to care. That's my point. The Kubernetes API over the CSI spec could get that value, right, from a different object. Right now we get it from the volume snapshot content object. If there was another type of
but hold on. The volume content object gets it from the return value from the create snapshot CSI RPC, right? So from the CSI's perspective, the only way you get that string is as a return value from create snapshot or from list snapshot.
True. And did the CSI driver not have a say in building that object? They probably did, right?
Well, I'm just saying, like
CSI does not. I mean, volume snapshot does not have volume snapshot content does not have a field to save that. So you have
Any
some
one of those
suggestion?
IDs, which would come back from create snapshot or list snapshot and would be usable as an input to change block tracking, is presumed to also be valid for like a volume clone operation. So
True.
what we're getting at is like they want to define a special kind of snapshot,
True.
which is valid for some purposes and not valid for other purposes, and that's fine.
Which
But like we should put language in the CSI spec that says, hey, you can also use these other kinds of snapshots that are not valid for cloning as inputs into the change block tracking RPC, just so that it's clear, right? Otherwise, people will be scratching their head and saying, like, why the heck can't I clone this thing? It's a snapshot ID that I got from my VMware implementation.
So you're saying you want, if such an object can exist clearly, and and how it gets created is up to the vendor, right? But you're saying that you do not think that we should just make a change only in the Kubernetes layer without having the same change in the CSI layer.
Yeah, we have to explain what's going on with that ID and say, like, not only can you pass in snapshot IDs, which have a definition as far as the CSI spec is concerned, which implies that they're clonable, but also these other snapshot IDs, which may not be clonable. I think that's all you need to do is just clarify.
All right. I
So
get you.
kind of introduce the volume snapshot as like non-clonable, just to like make it like point in time reference for change block tracking instead of having new objects or things.
I think we could do something like that. We could say like, yeah, some snapshots for whatever reason are only usable for change block tracking purposes and not actual volume cloning purposes. I think people could grasp that in this context, but I wouldn't want to do it with totally silently and just pretend that it's not different.
Okay.
Because that will lead to problems in the future when someone tries something and it doesn't work and they say, what's wrong with the spec?
Okay, so
Yeah,
essentially it's got back to here. Sorry, Rakshit. So over here, we'll add the target. No, the targets is the second one. An alternative for the base, right?
No, I think the this conversation like was more like reuse the current existing volume snapshot, but define them to be like non-clonable, like non-restorable
But
sort of
then
thing.
no, but then you are changing the snapshots. It's not really a snapshot, right? So I think this is
Well,
a
it's no longer a snapshot from the
it's not a
Kubernetes
snapshot.
perspective,
Yeah.
but the handle is still usable
Right.
for
But it's a different the handle is
change block
different. It's
tracking.
not the same as the
Right.
snapshot.
So we'd add a different field called, say, a base non-clonable snapshot ID or something.
I mean, like Xing, like the storage vendor could like map this volume snapshot handle with the ID internally and store it, right? Like VMware could do that so that it knows what is being referred to with such a kind of snapshot.
Well, but the snapshot is
Maybe
deleted and we won't have that anymore, right? The snapshot will be deleted.
no, like yeah, let's say there is a volume snapshot class parameters which tells you to create this kind of a snapshot that will be used for tracking purposes only. So like you can create a snapshot and then like delete it or just that you store the tracking ID somewhere.
Mm.
Then when you get it through the change block tracking
No, but
API, you
then you are
still
actually not really so what you are suggesting is what you no, but this is like we still need to save the original. We still need to save the original UUID, right? So you are saying you stuff this in the same place while we are saving the snapshot ID, just add this ID as well. And then when you
I mean like
delete the snapshot, the volume snapshot content, volume snapshot API object is still there. That's not going to work, right?
No, I
What
think
is
we should not change anything with existing Kubernetes objects. I mean, if we start with that, right, then we
no,
talk.
not change it. Like the storage vendor, like internally map it to like what they need to serve the change block tracking.
Correct.
how do you map it? That's what exactly I was asking you, right? So you are saying we need to save it somewhere. Where do we save it? You're saying save it in where we are saving the ID, that place, or where are we saving this? In the current
That would be left
snapshot.
to like the storage vendor, like where you save the metadata or something related to the volume, maybe.
Well, then
It's at CSI we
that
have like
that's like auto ban, right? We are trying to figure out if we can do this one in the API itself, right? You're talking about some auto ban approach. Then, like Ben was saying, anyone can just do whatever they want. It's definitely possible. But we are trying to see if we can do something with the proper API.
I mean, like I understand it, but it's like volume snapshot handle is created by the driver, right? So you guys can like encode the information which you want it to.
But
Well,
then,
it's a return value from create snapshot, but then I think what Xing is trying to say is if the snapshot gets deleted, then like the Kubernetes object needs to go away because it's not, you can't clone that anymore. And Kubernetes snapshots are meant to be clonable. So you can delete the snapshot and the volume snapshot content, but keep the handle and then stick that somewhere else. But then you need to define the somewhere else.
Yeah, that's the thing we're trying to figure
No,
out.
I meant like the Ben in the case where you were talking about non-clonable volume snapshot.
Yeah.
I meant in that case we could have the handle actually refer to the tracking ID in the backend, like after we define a non-clonable.
Then how do you...
At the CSI layer, that's fine. But like when you delete the snapshot, presumably you also delete the Kubernetes objects that refer to it because Kubernetes expects it to be clonable. And if it isn't, you have to delete those objects. Right. Otherwise, when they try to clone it, it's going to fail. And then that's another change in behavior that's not really valid.
So let's walk it through from the backup apps perspective. Somebody has to know there's a vendor specific detail here, correct? And that's typically going to be the backup app. Otherwise, what are they going? Why would they even fill up a vendor specific field? So when we using the Kubernetes API, when we try to get change block tracking, the way we process it is we look for the changes in the target volume, right? We're getting the diff between the base and the target, and we then pick out the changes from the target volume. We don't actually have to have the base volume around. So we're not trying to clone the base volume at that point in time.
You have to know what the last snapshot is that you backed up.
That's right. So the responsibility is in the backup app, right? To actually make the call to the API. So the backup app
and presumably today that's just a pointer to a snapshot that still exists.
That is what the spec calls for today. Agreed. Yeah. Now, if we wanted to use this VMware specific feature, say, right, and there's something like a trackable the CVT ID of some form, which is interpreted by the vendor, defined by the vendor. If the backup app has to get that ID from somewhere, so that's the backup app's problem. But if they were to get that app, then they can just pass it through into the base snapshot ID with the understanding that the CSI driver is the one that can interpret it. But the sidecar right now is doing a SAR check on this object, right, identified by the first ID. And that doesn't exist anymore. VMware doesn't want that object to be in the cluster anymore. So it comes down to how we are interpreting this stuff in this API.
Are you saying the backup app would have deleted the snapshot already and just kept the ID in its own metadata somewhere?
Yes.
Knowing that that's safe to do with that specific storage volume.
Yes, correct.
So you're saying you don't even need another API change at all?
What I'm saying, yes, you're right, Xing, but a little bit more than just that. What I'm saying is, so this right now, when we make the call to our iterator to get the data, both these are volume snapshot names in the namespace over here.
Okay.
We could right now we do SAR checks on both of these things to make sure that the caller has the permissions to do this. If VMware wants to not have this object, right, but just provide an ID, right, we'd have to not interpret this as a volume, correct? Instead, we'd have to have another field to say this is just a tracking ID, and let the backup vendor who makes the call to the API do that.
Okay.
And the side effect of doing that is there will not be a SAR check on that. The ID will be taken directly. Now, I was wondering in my mind,
what is the SAR check? I'm sorry, I'm not following that part.
Subject access review check, basically permissions.
Who's doing that?
Right now, the sidecar is doing it.
So authorization, basically. You do
authorization check. So, I was wondering whether it would be a security violation if we pass an ID instead of an object, but not so, because this one is always going to be an object name. There's no taking this away, right? So, given that
I'm trying to understand what the sidecar. Sorry, I don't have direct experience with this sidecar. I'm trying to figure out what is its interface that it normally deals with. Because it seems to me that you can always extract these IDs from the snapshot object and keep them around, and you never need the Kubernetes object. So like who was caring about the Kubernetes objects existing in the security permissions?
Of course, we have the CSI driver doesn't do any security checks. It's a sidecar that does it on its behalf. Otherwise, someone can just go and pull the blocks out or pull the metadata out from any other namespace. They're just giving data.
So I think the security token which we have there in the request is the service account token. So we go and check if that particular service account has the permissions to check the volume snapshot in that particular namespace, and then we fetch the volume snapshot and the content and get the handle out of it, and then we pass the handle to the CSI driver.
Right.
Okay, so you're saying the backup application might not have access to read those objects itself. It only has access to read the volume snapshot, but not the volume snapshot content. And then the
backup object, the backup, yeah, okay. Do we check for volume snapshot content permission too? I don't think so.
What I'm getting at is, like when you get the volume snapshot content, like you have the ID at that point.
Yes,
so
yes.
Anyone who can read that object, the game is over. Right? You're not protecting anything by performing that check. So is the principle that like you should be able to have a service account that can't see volume snapshot content objects? It can only see the volume snapshots, and then this sidecar can see the volume snapshot content and pulls it out for
If you can read the volume snapshots, then you have the right to clone the volume, right? So to clone the snapshot. So as long as you have those permissions, you can see it, whether or not you can read the content. I agree. So
where I'm going is how would the backup application have ever gotten this ID if it couldn't see the volume snapshot content? Like that's the flaw I'm seeing now is if it can't see the content object, it never saw the ID ever, and it couldn't have.
And again, that's so anyone who wants to use the VMware in this particular case, the VMware thing better have content access, because that's in a vendor specific domain. It's not.
But you should. So backup vendor should be able to, right? Because remember we have that feature volume mode conversion.
Yeah.
You have to add the annotation on the content. You should have that permission.
I think they have. I think it's required to have permission for that permission embed. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just.
Yeah. So I don't know what's the right approach to take. Definitely, we can add another field at least to the CSI spec. I don't know whether you want to go, to the Kubernetes spec. Do you want to go all the way down to the CSI spec? Because the format of the string is opaque anyway. And if the CSI driver defines a format which works for tracking ID versus a clonable snapshot, it's totally their problem.
At the CSI driver, the problem is a semantic one. Yes, the IDs can have any format you want, but there's an implication that a snapshot ID couldn't be passed into create volume.
If someone gives that ID to a cloning operation, the CSI driver should turn around and say invalid. I mean, what's the big deal?
Yeah, it's just the implication is that should never happen, right? Unless it's been deleted, and so, and similarly, a deleted snapshot ID is presumably not valid for change block tracking. But we're saying in this special case, you can delete the snapshot and then still use its ID afterwards,
right? Which
is just weird, right? And so you got to put something in the spec that says, hey, this is a thing that we're okay with under these circumstances.
So you're saying it's a documentation change over here for this part in the CSI spec?
Yeah. I don't think we need new fields or to rename anything. We just got to document that the semantic implications of using a snapshot ID for change block tracking after the snapshot has been deleted, and like what that actually means.
Okay, cool. So what you're saying is this: we put some in this paragraph. We'll add some stuff saying something that the snapshot doesn't have to be clonable, right? It could be a previously deleted snapshot, whatever.
Well, I don't know. We'd have to think. I mean, I'm not wearing my CSI spec hat right now. We'd have to think through the implications of it. I'm just saying that like we can't do nothing because it's too weird to just allow this and not talk about it.
Okay. Yeah. Well, so the CSI part, okay, that's clear that would be a documentation change there. On the Kubernetes part, though, because we are doing access checks and trying to at least load the object, we'd get a failure if this object doesn't exist. So on the Kubernetes API side, we will have to add another object, another field, because we can't tell we can't tell the difference in a name and just a string. We would be looking up that base snapshot name and getting a not found error. So we'd have to add a field here at least on the Kubernetes API. And how the vendor comes up with the value is the vendor's problem, I think, or the backup app's problem. Does that make
I
sense?
guess like we can have like a base snapshot handle and prefer it over the base snapshot name, like if it's like actually included in the request.
Do we have anyone here from VMware who can explain how this feature actually works internally? Because I'm trying to understand.
Oh, okay, but
He's actually very familiar with this, right?
I'm a consumer of this API, and I know how it works.
Yeah, he's familiar with that.
Is it the case that like if you pass in an older snapshot ID that's like multiple snapshots ago, it doesn't work? Or can you pass in any snapshot ID and get whatever the delta is from? I mean,
So it depends on how much metadata is saved in the underlying storage infrastructure. So the call, I believe, is something like this, right? This is the query change disk areas call. And this is the current snapshot, and this is like a previous change ID. They don't require the quote unquote snapshot ID of the old one. They just want the change ID of the old one.
Right, but what I'm trying to understand is like, how can it be that it knows what's changed since that time, but it can't clone what was there at that time?
It's their format. It's totally their format. They keep a marker, if you may, a tag, I believe. Is that right, Xing?
Right, and this snapshot is also could be deleted. The reason you cannot clone it is because it's already deleted, right?
Yeah.
You just you have that point in time, but then you don't have the date. I mean.
Okay, so presumably there could be multiple old snapshots that refer to multiple old points in time, and it could tell you the changes from any of them. It doesn't have to be the last one.
Yeah.
It's just that it's lost the data that existed before some marker.
Right.
And that's defined to be at least one snapshot in the past, or one marker in the past. So as long as you have the last one, you're good. I'm just trying to think through like what are the actual limits of this strategy, and like if you wanted to fully expose it in the CSI spec, how would you talk about it in a way that's not totally VMware specific? Because
that was why I said maybe we don't put it in the CSI spec. It's something the sidecar can handle and document.
Yeah, I mean, but violating the spec is always an option. But like, we can't pretend that that's.
But is it a violation of the spec? The sidecar, see that? Okay, it's kind of a debatable question. Is it a violation of the spec? The sidecar is saying, sidecar's job is to fill in the spec, and it fills in the spec from Kubernetes objects.
You're doing something non-portable. That's what it comes down to. Like, if you do that, and then you try to run it on something else, like it's just not going to work.
Well, the point is the CSI specs, if you put the right IDs into the CSI spec, it should just work, correct? And we have to assume that the VMware driver is going to support that. Xing, will that be correct?
Yeah. I think
but the point of the CSI spec is to define a way that if you do it the way the spec says, it will work everywhere, right? That's the whole point.
Right. I hear you. Yeah. So, okay. So it comes down to how to, what is the ID, and do we have to have another field to explain it? Yeah.
Probably.
I think there's a way we could document that, in certain cases, it's okay to do this thing in a way that isn't VMware specific, but would speak to the behavior that we want here.
Yeah.
I think like we have list snapshots and list volumes, which can list volumes of snapshot that does not have like a PVC or a volume snapshot attached in the Kubernetes cluster, right?
Correct.
So this can be like one of those variants, like there is a volume
No, but it's
snapshot.
the inverse of that. This is
Not
an ID which actually isn't a snapshot,
Yeah.
but is usable for.
Yeah. But what the thing
Yeah.
is, as a backup vendor, where would I have gotten the ID from previously? Correct? Would it be
Yeah.
the volume snapshot content ID from the previous time and I saved it somewhere? What is my responsibility as a backup vendor of getting this ID and stashing it somewhere to use in the future?
Yeah. From the discussion so far, I think like if you want Delta, you will have to stash it.
Right, but what is the ID? I mean, if we look purely at the Kubernetes domain, right? Kubernetes namespace, sorry, domains as a CO, right? The only objects we see are Kubernetes objects, and from the ones related to this are the volume snapshot and volume snapshot content object. And the CSI handle, driver handle is in this volume snapshot content. So let's assume we can get that. But is that volume snapshot content object what I would have to put in here for the CSI driver, Xing?
I need to think about that, right? So can we add that
Yeah, I
in
have
there?
not
So
actually
that's
looked
something
at.
I need to, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. If you can
I
get
need to
that, would be cool.
need to see that, yeah,
Wait,
because that's like
the,
an
the,
internal hand. Yeah.
the main gripe that I have is that the way we've defined snapshots in CSI and Kubernetes is is exactly something that you can clone new volumes from.
Yeah,
Like
yeah. We
that's literally
definitely
all you
cannot.
can do with the snapshot.
Yeah, we cannot
And
violate
here
that.
we're coming up with a new definition of like this is a snapshot that you can't clone volumes from. It's like
No.
it's just a fundamentally different
We
concept.
cannot allow that. So we have to be able to clone that. Just I think Carl was saying just like he need to at least get that ID somewhere when the snapshot was first created, then he can maybe save it, right? Is that Carl you're saying?
Yeah. So,
So basically
as a
we need to
backup vendor,
somehow,
where do I get that ID?
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm just right now just thinking out loud. I don't know where else because I don't want to change. We don't want to change the API because it's
Yeah.
snapshot.
Or maybe
So
VMware driver
the
can actually have that mapping still persist somewhere or internally query it.
yeah.
Persist
The
is
snapshot
No,
handle
Kubernetes.
to
but
query
then
those. Yeah.
I don't know if we yeah. So I need to check like the length and all of that if that works. If we just put that in the the handle itself, I don't know if that works. So that's something
Yeah,
I
I don't
check
know the
first.
format
I'm
of
not
that.
sure. I need to check because right now we already have two UIDs, the voting ID plus the snapshot ID. Already have those two. If we add another one, I just need to check like what
Yeah,
implementation or
yeah.
and all of that, right? To see if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
we have to have that. And if
So,
you already have two, right, and it's basically you're saying that the CSI driver knows how to parse that
but
feed.
yeah, but
And so they
I
could
just need
they
to
could from some point in the future add a third, and the vendor doesn't. I mean, as a backup app, I wouldn't care what the format is.
But
I
yeah, I
just
just
take
need
a
to
fake
check
key and pass it
if there's
through.
any problems. I don't know because this is a very big change.
Yeah. Okay.
It's like yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah,
where.
and CSI
Otherwise, I
handle
don't
also.
know where else to
Yeah.
add that.
So
Right?
definitely. So what I'm getting out of the discussion is one, we need to document something to make it apparent that this is not a clonable volume, etc. Right? And that's probably it's either the CSI level and or the Kubernetes API level. Two, we have to figure out the information flow. How would a backup app get this thing, right? Okay, to stash, and so that they can feed it to the API later, right? These are the major items I'm taking out of this discussion.
Well, and I just want to add to that like we have to figure out like why is it better to do this through the standard CSI path than to go straight to VMware to get this information. Like if it's a fundamentally proprietary thing that no one will ever support other than VMware, and like maybe backup vendors would be better off just obtaining the information they need to figure out this is a VMware volume and then going and talking straight to VMware to get this data and do their special optimization. Because other backup vendors that don't know about this like will not take advantage of it because it won't be portable, right? So if it's fundamentally non-portable, like maybe it's actually better just to leave it proprietary. Like we'd have to come up with an argument for why we'd want to standardize it at all.
But there you have another side of argument, right? You're asking for feedback. Right now, this is alpha. Do you want to look at why this API does not work for vendors, right?
Yeah.
So right now is actually the good time to discuss
Yeah,
it.
yeah. And if we can make the case that like another vendor would support this exact same mechanism someday, then like that's a good reason to put it in the standard. But if we can't, if it's really like this is a VMware thing and will only ever be a VMware thing, then it's like, well, that doesn't belong in a spec, right? That should just be a proprietary extension that if you want to use it, you consume the VMware API. That's how I think about it, right?
I hear you. I hear you. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, they're very good questions. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else about this?
No, I think we all got some to familiarize ourselves with some of these things. And Xing, if you can get us some more data on the content, and the rest is a philosophical discussion around is this portable or not? Good points.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so next, volume group snapshot. So the cap has been updated. It's been reviewed. And then guest snapshot. So Ben, what are we doing with the guest snapshot?
I had pinged James, and I don't recall him writing back. So maybe we just approve it.
Yeah, can you? I mean, you can approve it. So
yeah. I can. It hasn't been on my mind because I've been waiting for the response and it never came. So thank you for the reminder. I'll go check and make sure that it's been silent, and if so, we can say, well, he had his chance, and I'm going to go approve it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and then the other thing is the replication group, right? So we talked about this one last time. So I was trying to go over the workflow, how to set up the pairs, how to fail over. Then I just realized there's one thing missing. Ben actually had pinned you about this one. So if we look at,
Is there a doc that I'm supposed to be looking at here?
this is can you see this? I'm sharing the screen.
I can see it on my phone screen. Is there a link to it in the
It's in the agenda. It's in the agenda doc. Yeah, it's in the agenda doc. So we look at this API before, right? So this one we already went through. So I'm proposing to in the replication relationship content spec. So right now, initially we have this volume mappings, required mappings, right? So this one we have it. So I'm proposing to add an optional field called the relationship handles. And the reason is, so let's say when you are establishing this replicating relationship, so you could have, let's say you have two sites, right? So you have volume pairs. You have PVC1, PVC2, PVC3, and 4, right? So let's say you have two pairs in there. So you establish them, so you start to do replication. But then when you get to time to do failover, you actually need to have this. So this relationship handle is more like it's kind of like a group ID. So if you have those together, right? Maybe not every three system have this. So this is maybe a question for you, Ben. But normally there will be a group ID. So this would be like a ID for that group. So this way when you failover, it's going to be performing the failover on that group.
Yeah.
Only getting a list of volumes, that's not going to be enough. Because this is like you group them together, they are already there, right? So you have some identification on the three system for them to be together, right? So when you do any actions, then it has to be at the group level. Only having this is not enough.
How do you add a new pair volumes to the group?
We actually didn't really say, like here we have not really say we can add anything, but that's something we can discuss later. You can.
This is the thing that always gets me about groups is that like if we talk about groups, but we don't talk about how you mutate the groups, like.
So yeah, we haven't
get 1,000 corner cases.
Sure, we can add that. We can definitely add that. So that should be fine because that does not change this ID. You can add that. That does not change this ID, right? So this was. So I can actually, let me just add something here saying how to mutate the group. So let me add, maybe just, let me go over those that I already have. Then we can look at the mutating later. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the way I think about it is in an ideal world, the user wants to express their intent is like, I have this stuff. I want it to be replicated from here to here in a mutually consistent way. And like, of course, their intent could change over time where, I have 4 volumes today, I have 5 volumes tomorrow. So like being able to express that clearly is nice. Okay. If you have a reality where it's like the group is the fundamental concept and the replication can only happen on the group, like then you have a much deeper problem because now in order to change what gets replicated, you have to mutate the group first.
Yes, correct.
And then the relationship just picks up the fact that there's a new pair for free. And it's like that's a totally different API. Right. And I think from an end user perspective, like the first is more friendly, right? I express my intent.
Does not work. It does not work.
Huh? Well, it can. I mean, it depends.
No, storage system
depends on how the storage system.
Storage system does not handle that. It's
some storage systems don't handle that, but some do.
A lot of
storage
systems does not handle that. It's not just some, right? So some storage system only handle it without knowing the group ID. But others can only do that with knowing the ID. So you have to support both, right? You can't just say that's the only way is to you don't know what is your group, right? So okay, so maybe, so the mutation, I didn't add it earlier because I just realized I need to add this, initially, I know that initially when we started, so hey, maybe this is more flexible. But when I'm thinking about all the steps, I just realized it's just, I need that. So maybe let me just go over whatever I have that can add the, the mutation and all of that, that's later, right? So first is how to pair them. I think we initially when we first put together this one, I kind of assume like you have PVCs on both sides. You just establish the mapping. So that's the first case, right? So we had that, and then the second case would be if PVC is not created on the remote side, you want to say, hey, I want to protect my application that is on the local side, right? So that's probably actually more. Usually that's probably the case. You started with your application, then you say, hey, let me protect that, right? So let me just work through that. So in that case, what we can initially have a replication relationship on side 1. So then you just you know your local PVCs you want to protect. You can add them in your PVC mappings, right? And then the content will just have that volume 1, volume 2. And then now if you say, hey, let me, so the after this relationship is created on local side, then we have the replication controller that will be creating the pairing PVCs on remote side. So now I have the remote PVC 2, remote PVC 4 created, right? And then
So I think that the operation of like bootstrapping a replication relationship versus managing an existing relationship is like fundamentally different things. Right? You're correct that like you start with just a bunch of volumes that are not replicated and you need to like pick a place to replicate them to. And so that's like scheduling the secondary and bootstrapping a relationship. Like that's a very important step that you need help with. But like I'm much more concerned about the steady state. After you've done that, now you have a primary and a secondary. You're trying to manage them, and like you need to be able to break the relationship. You need to be able to reverse the relationship. You need to be able to, perhaps establish other relationships. But like you really need to separate the bootstrapping step of like, I have data that isn't currently replicated, pick a place to put it and start replicating, versus like, I already have data that is being replicated and I need to control the direction of the replication or synchronous, the various other aspects of it. Is it asynchronous? Is it synchronous? And, is it going one way? Is it going the other way? Like all the second one is where the relationship object is much more valuable, is when you have a primary and a secondary that exists. If you don't have a secondary yet, like you need a separate mechanism to cause the secondary to come into existence. And I don't know, whether that's Kubernetes job or some storage specific things job. That's a much harder problem. And that also speaks to, the questions like grouping. If things need to be replicated together and maybe you need to establish a group first and then make sure there's enough space on the secondary for the whole group and create the whole group and then establish the relationship between the two groups, if that's how this particular system works. I wouldn't want to use the relationship for the first part. I want to use the relationship for the second part. And the first part is like established.
You want to assume it's already created?
Right. I mean, because the relationship should express, two places. And if you only have one place, like you don't have a relationship yet, you need to be able to express an intent to go make a secondary that is compatible with the primary. And that's sort of tricky in it for its own reasons.
It's outside of like this particular design, like the create.
No. I'm thinking it's like that's step 0 in the workflow, right? Is I have stuff that's not currently replicated. I need a way to ask the system to replicate it for me, and then we need to think through like what are all the choices you have there. How do you, how many degrees of freedom do you want to offer? How much do you want to make it, cookie cutter?
Sorry, I think we are on the top of the hour.
Oh,
okay. Yeah, because we started late on this topic. Okay, so we can, yeah. Okay, so let me work on this again, then we can come back. Okay, thank you. All right.
Thanks, Xing.
Bye.